Theodore Crowe is originally from Kentucky, from a family of tobacco farmers, railroad men, and moonshiners. He's a husband and father of 2 sons. Mr. Crowe's led a rather adventurous life, including a variety of occupations. He's worked as a nursing assistant, orderly in several institutions for the mentally and physically challenged, as a long-haul flatbed truck driver hauling steel for the automotive industry, a delivery driver for a food bank, and even a short stint as a stand-up comedian. Throughout his studies at Penn, he has worked at the Penn Museum as supervisor of security and as a docent. In his youth, he was for a time affiliated with a motorcycle gang. Tim's a member of the Society for Creative Anachronism, a medieval reenactment group dedicated to the study of arts and culture of the Middle Ages, known for dressing in authentic armor, engaging in realistic combat, using wooden swords. He's become infamous for dressing like his historic twin, King Henry VIII. As his wife thought about that, twin. Divorced beheaded, died. Divorced beheaded, survived. Right? So you want to fall on that.
I know where I'll be.
Tim's other interests and hobbies include genealogy, Egyptology, history, attending Renaissance fairs, and collecting statues of gods from ancient mythology and religious imagery from present-day religious traditions. He's an Anglophile and hopes to someday live and teach in England. He's had a lifetime interest in comparative religion. He has independently studied with Buddhist monks, Islamic sheikhs, and Hindu swamis. He's chanted with Buddhist and Christian monks and made merry while sky-clad with the Wiccans at the solstice. He's even danced with the Hare Krishnas. Tim graduated from Penn with the BA in Liberal Arts, majoring in religious studies in 2014, and continued his studies at Penn, working on his MLA and receiving his degree with a concentration in religious studies in 2017. His capstone is entitled The Fire of Prometheus, an examination of religion along the left-hand path. His readers were Dr. Devin Patel and Dr. Nancy Watterson. Tim.
Hi, folks. Thank you, Chris. I have to follow that. Thank you, Jim. I'm sitting here about to cry. Now I got to get up here and talk about the devil. Bring the room down a little bit. Okay. I also will be doing some reading from a script, so you have to kind of bear with me. Mostly because I tend to get a little long-winded, and if I keep going, nobody else will be presenting today. I would like to thank Chris as well as LPS for giving me this opportunity to share my research. As Chris mentioned, I have had a lifelong interest in religious studies, as well as esoteric and unorthodox religious traditions. I have found in each tradition certain unorthodox practices or sects that seem antinomian against the law of its host religion. From Sex Tantra of Buddhism, I kept this as G-rated as I could, from the Sex Tantra of Buddhism, to Voodoo, to Kabbalism and ceremonial magic, to radical Sufi traditions, as well as modern-day Satanism. Each religion has its own unorthodox expression, a dark side that follows each of these faiths like a shadow. I've often referred to them as the back doors to salvation and enlightenment. Among occultists, these traditions have been categorized under one title, the left-hand path. The left-hand path, right-hand path system was made popular by Helena Blavatsky, a founder of the Theosophical Society, and also lived in the White Dog Cafe not far from here for a while. She used this system to categorize religious and magical practices she deemed either positive or negative. Traditional Orthodox religious practices and white magic were seen as harmonious with nature and divine forces, and thus right-hand path. And unorthodox antinomian practices and black magic, which went against the harmony of nature and divine forces, were thus left-hand path. Blavatsky borrowed these terms from Hindu and Buddhist traditions. The word dakshinachara, meaning right-hand practice, and vamachara, meaning left-hand practice. This seems to have originated with the yoga teachings that cosmic and divine energy enters through the left and exits through the right of the body. If you go against that flow, you're going against the divine will. Blavatsky system has now been adopted by most occult and New Age religions. They use this pretty commonly to say what's good or bad in a practice or a religion. The left-hand side has always been seen as negative in most cultures throughout time, mostly because most people are right-hand dominant, and left-hand has become seen as bad. In Southeast Asia and Islamic countries, the left hand is used for unsavory tasks such as toiletry, and of course, having done that, it becomes not very polite to use the left hand to eat or to shake hands. Even the word sinister comes from the Latin word sinistra, which means from the left. So in his groundbreaking book, for his groundbreaking book, Lords of the Left-Hand Path, Dr. Stephen Flowers attempted to give a neutral and universal definition for left-hand path traditions. He defined left-hand path, and like him, like me, he's long-winded. The path of non-union with the objective universe, the way of isolating consciousness within the subjective universe and in a state of self-imposed psychic solitude, refining the soul or psyche to increasingly perfect levels. The objective universe is then made to harmonize itself with the will of the individual psyche. I thought that this was a good definition, and I thought that it seemed to explain what the left-hand path does, but it doesn't seem to express what its aims are, or what most religious scholars would call its ultimate concern. Therefore, of course, I had to revise this. Using both Flowers' definition as well as a few other definitions from Michael Aquino and Lester Crowe, I came up with my own revised definition, which is equally long-winded. The left-hand path is the conscious resistance of union with the objective universe, and seeks to isolate consciousness within the subjective universe and in a state of self-imposed psychic solitude, refine the soul or psyche to increasingly perfect levels. The objective universe is then made to harmonize itself with the will of the individual psyche, thus making the achievement of self-deification the ultimate concern. In more simple language, this is stating that the left-hand path seeks to make the inner reality of the mind become the physical reality in the real world, thus rebelling against the natural order of things, going against that order, to recreate and control the practitioner's environment through pure force of will. And of course, any person or being, entity, that can control the world through their will is a god in most cultures. And so, hence the quest for self-deification. As humans are a social species, this means rebellion against the status quo, be it religious or sociological. Such acts are seen as blasphemous, heretical, and unorthodox. In other words, the dark side of the human experience. Now, the question I asked myself was whether the left-hand path was a modern invention that seeks to define and categorize whole religious traditions based on oversimplified criteria, or does it truly identify a universal perspective that can be found throughout the world religions? I felt strongly that the latter was the case, that this wasn't just some made-up term that they were shoving things in, and I sought to prove it. To achieve this, I decided to examine the three most influential and independent religious cultures: Judeo-Christian traditions, Islamic traditions, and the traditions of the East. And I really wish I had more time to go into the China stuff, but it's great. But anyway, to isolate these left-hand path traditions, I examined different methodological and religious archetypes that embody the left-hand path perspective. With regards to the left-hand path, we find three archetypes that reoccur. The rebel, the trickster, and especially what's known as the Promethean archetype, which I'll go into more. Probably the best known, here we go, probably the best known combination of the three can be found in the notorious figure of Satan, who is believed by billions of Christians, Muslims, and Jews to be the embodiment of evil. Satan, the adversary, is of course seen as the rebellious enemy of God, who tries to tempt Christ to deny God and worship him. However, it is in the story of Adam and Eve that we find Satan is both trickster and Promethean. By telling Eve that by eating the forbidden apple of knowledge she would become like a god, we find that it is Satan who kept his promise. And actually it is God that lied, because Adam and Eve both became godlike and self-aware and lost their bestial innocence by recognizing their nakedness. And despite God's warning, they did not die. I found that kind of interesting. Like Prometheus, who gave the gift of fire to mankind and was likewise cursed for it, Satan can then be seen as the father of modern man. Both the fruit of Satan and the fire of Prometheus can be interpreted as the fire of the human spirit and self-awareness. For this reason, the Enlightenment and Romantic writers such as Goethe, Milton, and Shelley saw Satan as representing man's emancipation from religious oppression and a symbol of scientific and social progression. Now, in Islam, one would assume that there would be no representation of the dark side in what is arguably the strictest of the monotheistic faiths. That assumption would be quite wrong. Actually, Islam has quite a rich left-hand path tradition. In the character of bliss, also known as shaitan, we find an archetype of rebellion against God. By refusing to allow Allah's order refusing to obey Allah's order to bow down to Adam as the sovereign of earth, Iblis is cursed and banished from Allah's presence. Yet Islamic theologians had a problem with the existence of Iblis through the philosophy known as Tawheed. Tawheed is the theory of the absolute oneness. It actually means one. The absolute oneness and uniqueness of Allah. This means that if Allah, anything that Allah is, nothing else can be that. He is completely unique. Well, if Allah exists, then we don't exist, or nothing else exists. This naturally led to a philosophy, a belief in pantheism, wherein all things are of God. If we exist, we must be part of God. That means that Iblis must also be part of God and serve some divine purpose. Among some Sufi sects, Iblis is seen as the ultimate expression of devotion to Allah. He would not bow down to any other than Allah, even if it meant the sacrifice of his banishment. This made Iblis representative of the unrequited lover of Allah, which some Sufis saw as the greater love that could be achieved through a union with Allah. One is thinks of the story of Layla and Majnun. It's often reflected as this same type of love. Some groups, such as the Yazidis, saw Iblis as a guardian or black flame to the highest realm of devotion, and came to worship him as a gateway to God, to Allah. In the Yazidi sect, the idea of Iblis was embodied in the manifestation of Malatas, the peacock king, who was worshipped in the form of a golden peacock idol. Likewise, many of the Yazidi masters were also worshipped alongside Iblis, thus fulfilling the self-deification requirement in the left-hand path definition. Though we have many left-hand path archetypes in the vast religions of the East, I'll concentrate here on the oldest, the god Shiva. Shiva, in the guise of the destroyer, has been included in the Holy Trinity along with Brahma and Vishnu. Shiva's power as an ascetic as well as a phallic god is embodied in his sexuality. Though through his passion and fury, he destroys and creates within the cosmos, and by subjugating his sexual energy, he transforms it into mental and intellectual forces that may lead to enlightened forms. What qualifies Shiva as an archetype for the left-hand path is that he is also seen as a god of magicians and as a focal point within tantric antinomian practices. Thus, some of his more unorthodox followers go against Vedic ritual and law. One such Shivite sect were the Kapalika, love the Kapalika, or Skullmen, who were known for the aesthetic worship and extreme antinomian practices that involved a ferocious incarnation of Shiva called Bhairava, and the dark goddess Kali, to whom they offered sexual substances, meat and alcohol. Think of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This is as close as you're going to really get. The Kapalika engaged in sexual forms of worship that ignored caste. They carried begging bowls made of human skulls and an identifying staff with a human skull on top. It's like out of a movie. The Kapalikas believe that by breaking social taboos, once again, you're going against this flow of the divine, by breaking social taboos and violating the Vedic laws, they would gain the power of their gods via possession. In the Shivite Vamachara, left-hand practice, the ultimate goal was, once again, self-deification, with the highest level being Qualis, which was the achievement of immortality and supernatural powers as a result of spiritual practice. In the modern age, several self-described left-hand path religions have emerged, the most influential being the Church of Satan and the Temple of Set. The Church of Satan was founded by Anton Zandar LaVey, a professional musician and carnival worker, bit of a hustler, a carny. I met him. LaVey had harbored a lifelong interest in the occult. In 1966, LaVey founded the Church of Satan, with himself as high priest. It proclaimed 1966, year one of the age of Satan. Anyone seen Rosemary's Baby? Year one. Yeah. Drawing upon his background as a showman, LaVey allowed his colorful and highly dramatic satanic rituals that used a nude woman as an altar to be photographed and filmed, which caused a media sensation. In his magnum opus, The Satanic Bible, LaVey outlined his satanic philosophy. Unlike earlier views of Satanism as a form of devil worship based on Christian theology, the Satanism of the Satanic Bible promotes a form of religious humanism that is atheistic at its core. According to LaVey, there is no God, and thus no actual Satan as an existing entity to worship. In LaVey's Satanism, man is not spirit but a beast, no better than any other animal. LaVey concluded that the archetype of Satan represents the true nature of mankind, harkening back to what I was talking about through Milton and Goethe and some of the rest. Therefore, LaVey argued that if humans make their own gods and Satan represents the true nature of man, then Satanism is the natural religion of mankind. Further, man should worship his own ego as the only existent God. LaVey was the first to take a humanist philosophy openly associated with the satanic archetype in a religious context. Therefore, LaVey must be given credit as the inventor of modern Satanism. Though the Temple of Set emerged from a splinter group of the Church of Satan, they are radically different. Founded in 1975 by Michael Aquino, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, with PhDs in psychology and political science. along with a handful of disgruntled Church of Satan priests, the Temple of Set is a highly mystical initiatory religion that is dedicated to the ancient Egyptian god Set, the lord of rebellion and chaos. Unlike the Church of Satan, the Temple of Set maintains that the Prince of Darkness, represented by Set, is the true living entity that is the source of the Promethean archetype. According to Aquino, it was Set that gave mankind the fire of self-awareness, this fire of Prometheus, that manipulated the evolution of our primate ancestry to produce modern humans. Kind of like in 2001 with the monolith, and they start that type of thing. In fact, they even use that as an image sometimes. Thus, the essence of man is not natural to the objective universe, and true to the left-hand path, it is his goal to spiritually evolve into higher levels of consciousness with the goal of self-deification. This process is known as kepha, the ancient Egyptian word meaning to become, and is achieved by self-exploration via black magical practice and by undefined initiatory quest that must be turned by each Scythian. This makes the Temple of Set the most definitive left-hand path religion in existence. Okay, in conclusion, I feel that this examination offers ample evidence that the left-hand path does indeed represent a universal form of religious expression. Although the cultures and religions of man differ radically across the world, the one common denominator is the human condition itself. We all share the same emotions, senses, and intellectual possibilities universal. As the existence of some type of religion or spiritual practice is universal, so too is the existence of the left-hand path, making it equally a reflection of some innate facet of the human condition. This leads to new questions. What innate facets within the collective human psyche does the left-hand path reflect? What overall purpose does it serve? And why is it that in every single religion, regardless of where it is, that this will always occur? The answer, I feel, is in the human condition itself. Whereas the traits of natural harmony and social conformity are shared by other species on the planet who live by instinct, that are rooted in preservation and the continuation of the species, the traits of rebellion and self-aggrandizement are firmly rooted in the one trait that makes humans unique, our defining sense of self-awareness. It is this self-awareness that has caused us to rebel against against nature and create our own aesthetic environment. We're sitting in out of the rain right now. We're not at the mercy of the natural world. We build our own homes with artificial light and air conditioning and heat. We don't live by the law of the claw anymore, by the laws of nature. We live by our own laws, by our own human laws that we have created by our society. And we don't have to live by pure instinct any longer. We have eclectic knowledge that we share, that we pass on in institutions just like the one we're sitting in right now. So it is actually the thinking mind of man that has caused our abstract intellect and self-awareness that has allowed us to create language, culture, science, literature, music, religion, and civilization. Dylan Thomas said that man is part angel and part beast. And that duality seems to be true. However, it is the bestial side of our primate mind that seeks nature, harmony with nature and society. And it's the rebellious angel, this innate nature, this innate and defiant nature that seeks to own higher potential, to its own higher potential, which has come to define us. And and it is this which is reflected in the traditions of the left-hand path. Therefore, the angel within us is more akin to Milton's rebellious Lucifer than from some heavenly ground. So in a sense, we find that the ideal of the Promethean archetype can be said to be metaphorically correct. It is indeed the fire of Prometheus that has made man like unto gods. However, this fire is not the gift of some mythic deity or devil, but the fire of our own unique self that has sought and succeeded to conquer the objective universe through our shared subjective universe. And in doing so, we have created our own human reality. So in the end, we, the human mind, the thinking, rebellious human mind, are the greatest proof and achievement of the left-hand path. I thank you for your time and attention.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
I have a question. Before you were sharing this paper in class, I really knew nothing about it. Obviously, I've heard of the Church of Satan and stuff. But for people that might want to learn more just from like an educational perspective, do you have any advice to maybe see a certain documentary or read this book first, or to get introduced? Because you hit on like the existence of the left-hand path through several different religions. So is there a way that you suggest to maybe get an introduction that's healthy without getting...
Actually, the book that I mentioned earlier, which is really the only real book until I write one, on the left-hand path, is by Stephen Flowers, Dr. Stephen Flowers. It is commonly available. You can get it through Amazon or most bookstores. It's called Lords of the Left-Hand Path. And actually, it's a pretty good overlay. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but it is a good primer. I would say to avoid some of the books by Anton LaVey. He was a bit of a carny. So he openly admitted that, hey, if somebody wants to be conned, I'm more than willing to take their money. He said that all the time. So, yeah.